We are done looking at what is or isn't, and we are now going to start turning our attention to what is for Michigan football and what can be. Because you know what? I'm done with the pessimism. We've dealt with the pessimism, right? We were pessimistic to start the season. Now we're kind of in optimism mode. Why are we in optimism mode? Because now we have to deal with the team that we have. How can it get better instead of being doom and gloom? What is the next step? What are the good things that are happening? Let's talk about it on this episode this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday. We're back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Got pushed back a little bit time-wise. We're hours later than we normally like to be because I had some urgent things to take care of. Not in a bad way. They're urgent, just urgent in terms of having to get things done. So after the 5 p.m. hour, that's where we're at. Sorry for no drive time home, but you'll have your nightly what have you. All right, so let's talk about Alex Orji to start, because I think we heard some interesting things coming out of the press conference yesterday. I'm going to read some quotes here instead of inserting video because I just don't want to do it. But there's two quotes that I really want to highlight. I wrote about them on Wolverines Wire. And I had asked these questions of both of these players, starting with Colston Loveland. I had asked him, I don't remember exactly what I asked him, but kind of like, you see him in practice, we don't. What does he do well that we don't get to see? So I think it was kind of the same thing I asked for both of them. And Loveland said, I'm just kind of waiting for him to take over. I think he's definitely got it in him. It can be. Obviously, he's freaky, but just like I'm waiting on him, which I know he will, just to take over a game with his legs, with his arm strength. And I know it's coming, so I'm excited. I'm excited to see what comes. Then I asked Kendrick Bell something similar, and he says he's a vocal leader. He throws the ball well. If things aren't going right, he'll bring the whole offense together, be like, we got to get this right. Let's fix this next period. And actually, we'll have a good period after that. He's just a really good leader. And then you add on, I asked first question to Kirk Campbell today. I asked him what he's seen from Alex Orji. What kind of player can he be? I tried to leave it a little bit more open-ended. And he said, yeah, what I saw from Alex is his first start was in a big game, huge game, arguably one of the biggest wins we've had at home since 2021 against Ohio State. I think 2023 against Ohio State was probably pretty big. And 2022 against Penn State. But, I digress. He was thrust in that opportunity. He was poised. He was composed. The stat line might not have showed everything he did, but he had command of the huddle and leadership. When we walked away from that game excited, which I did too, actually. A lot of you, not so much, but I did too. Last week, he had some development in the pass game. There were some things we need to clean up. He's taking leadership of the quarterback position, and when he's in the huddle, he has full command, and the players respond to that. So, there's that. And then he also kind of talked about the same thing that we talked about yesterday and the day before. The fact that he started going through his progressions later in the game. That he actually got to his fourth read on that 1st and 19. And that was something that we hadn't seen from him. Because and honestly, if he can do that, if the offensive line can protect him and guys can get open, that it completely changes the calculus of the things that we've talked about, right? Because a lot of what I have said about where this offense can go with him was kind of contingent on it being essentially a 2-read offense of, all right, you're going to set up 2 reads for him, and if he doesn't have those, just run. Now, he's had to run because he's been under duress, but if Alex Orji can get to a point where he's actually able to go through and make 4 reads and then deliver a throw, and I think some of the things are really good because I think that you kind of get a little bit of a, I don't remember exactly what I was going to say there, but I think what you are getting from him is, I think when you look at like the interception and it's kind of like, okay, he could have placed the ball better. He could have been earlier. Colston still should have caught it, but he didn't. That it's at least a learning experience with his first interception of like, okay, you need to be earlier and you need better ball placement. Put it on the other side. Instead of throwing inside, well, I guess that's technically outside. Or you throw that way, throw it more inside than you were, and make it so only Colston has an opportunity to go get that ball, and the defender doesn't. That's one of the things J.J. McCarthy did really well, was a lot of those ball placements where only the receiver could get the ball. Now, that wasn't always true. Sometimes he put it in a place where anyone could make a play on the ball, but he just had that moxie about him. But I digress. So I think that there's a lot to like coming out of the Minnesota game. And we did see a big step forward for him. Now it's going to be another tough defense that they're going to be seeing. We'll look in starting next segment at what Washington, where they rank in terms of their defensive prowess and offensive prowess, so we can kind of get ahead of that a little bit. But nonetheless, I think that you saw some progress from Alex Orji against a defense that is better than USC's. And even though it didn't necessarily pop off the page in terms of his passing yards, and you still look at it and say, that's not good, and you're not going to beat a lot of teams that way, that still holds true. But I think the good news is he did improve and was able to throw downfield. They kind of had a similar trajectory in terms of play calling, going from, Davis Warren's first game to his second, to what you saw from Alex Orji in week 1 to week 2. And keeping in mind, week 1, he didn't have a Colston Loveland to play with. Week 2, he didn't have a Samaj Morgan to play with, right? Davis Warren had all of those guys. And I think that the good news, I think, with Kirk Campbell is he's talking about the idea of, we have to self-scout and see what we can do to be creative. He really bristled at the idea that they weren't creative, which is something I bristled at yesterday. I'm glad, again, to see that I'm on the same page as the coaching staff. You can disagree with me, but you're also disagreeing with the coaching staff. I know a lot of you think that you're better than him, Kirk Campbell. I can tell you that's certainly not the case. Let me see if I can find this here. Well, let me get to this one quote, and then we'll get to the next one, because I had asked him the difficulty of having a quarterback trusting his reads. And Kirk Campbell says, the best way to get better at football is to play more football. The more you play, the better you get. We practice a lot of football plays, the things he was doing in practice that weren't showing up in games, and we'd coach him through a game, and he got through it there at the end. The reps are invaluable. The more reps you get, you're either going to get better or you stay the same. We've got to make sure we continue to progress. I thought he did that throughout the week. Quite frankly, we're one throw in the last game from being 31-3, and it's a much different situation. The point of emphasis I made to him is every rep counts. Okay, we're just going to continue find the quote that I'm looking for here. So one of the things he was asked about was getting Donovan Edwards more involved in the passing game. And he says, obviously you can go back and look. We did. He had the most snaps in 21 personnel. I didn't understand your question, but we did. That was one of the things that he had. Asked about, let's see, where is it here? I don't know if I can find it. So we'll probably just move on. A lot of text to sort through as I come stream of consciousness, say, hey, this is one of the things I want to add to the conversation. But he kind of bristled at some of this ideas that they weren't being creative. They certainly are. And it just doesn't mean that if the play doesn't work, part of it's execution, part of it's the defense, all of that kind of stuff. Then it's just going to look like, well, that didn't work, right? But you could see that they were being a lot more creative this last week in terms of play calling, and I feel like Kirk Campbell's starting to settle in a little bit. Because remember, he's been an offensive coordinator before, but now he's getting into the swing of being Michigan's offensive coordinator for the first time. So that's exciting in a lot of ways. All right, we're going to continue on. I want to get to Washington, a little bit of where they stand in terms of their rankings, both on CFB as far as their stats and some of their grades and stuff like that. We'll look all that stuff up on PFF. So we will get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, listen, the Tigers are in full swing. They are going to the ALDS. It is a big thing. You're going to get a home game. So the best way to get in the door is through Gametime. Now, Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They've got amazing other features like the super deal, and with their curated deals, it makes it easier to find the best price on great seats. And one of the great parts of Gametime is they have a lowest price guarantee, which means that Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a lower price elsewhere on the same seat. So, and also with the Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time. All right, let's talk a little bit about where Washington stands here. This is going to be a very tough game in terms of going up against yet another tough defense. Keep in mind, two of the teams that Michigan's played have played Michigan, so their defensive rankings probably a little bit better by virtue of that. But we'll kind of click through and look at a couple different things here. But Minnesota is the best defense Michigan's faced so far, number 5 in the country. They're allowing 226 yards per game. Michigan had out of the 5 games, they were right in the middle, 241 yards total. Obviously, Michigan had some short fields, didn't have to drive the field. But North Carolina barely outperformed Michigan. And Iowa is the other team that outperformed Michigan. Michigan scored the second amount of most points against Minnesota. Obviously, we live in a different world, but Texas at number 6, allowing 228 yards per game. As far as total defense, Michigan has had the second most yards on Texas, weirdly. And that's obviously with the Davis Warren experience, who had 204 yards passing and 80 yards rushing. Mississippi State's the only team with a little bit more balance that had 10 more yards exactly than Michigan. So Michigan kind of fell into the expectations there, right? And, you look at Fresno State and you look at Arkansas State and USC. USC is improved, but I'm just trying to look here. I can't find them quickly. USC is the 32 defense in the country. And obviously, they've given up more yards. They did against LSU, but Michigan's the second most. They held Utah State and Wisconsin below where they held Michigan. So they faced some tough defenses, upper echelon defenses for the most part. The only ones that aren't, Fresno State is a middling defense at 76. It's just below average as far as that's concerned. And Arkansas State is 115th in the country. Really not very good defense overall. Still Michigan, second most yards on Arkansas State. The only one that had more is number 16, Iowa State, the following game. So not very good. But Washington comes in, they are number 10 in the country. They're allowing 249.8 yards. The most yards they've given up in a game came against Washington State. They gave up 381, so they haven't even allowed 400 yards in a game as of yet. The most passing they allowed was in that game, 245, but otherwise you look at some of these other teams they've faced. Northwestern only got 112 yards total, 53 passing, 59 rushing. Hey, there's balance. Cool. Rutgers ended up beating them 21-18 at home with 115 yards passing and 184 yards rushing. That might be kind of what you're looking at for Michigan. And then the other teams they faced, Eastern Michigan, Weber State, whatever. Who cares about them? But they obviously have a pretty good defense overall. And they've faced a couple decent teams. Ethan Caliac-Manis has been very good for Rutgers, so that's pretty big. Passing defense, Michigan just faced the number 1 team in the country. That's Minnesota. They've, let's just look here. USC is the number 17 team. Again, they played Michigan and held them to 32 yards. So that's kind of a paper tiger, maybe to some degree. But Washington is number 6 in terms of passing yards allowed per game. Now, I think where some of the good news is, some not like in necessarily like super incredible news, comes in terms of the rushing yards. They are still in upper half. They're in the upper kind of quadrant, 51 in the country, allowing 121.8 yards rushing. You can run on Washington to some degree. Michigan's obviously going to really test that. And I'm curious to see how they're able to do in terms of some other things here. Texas, who kind of held Michigan, is 32 in rushing allowed. And Minnesota, let's look, is 61st. So you're kind of trying to figure some things out against so maybe middling. Minnesota's middling. They played Michigan, though. USC is middling at 78, but they played Michigan. Washington has some capability in terms of what they've allowed so far. In terms of scoring defense, Washington is number 10 in the country. So that is something to know. Let's flip over to the grades and look at where they are as far as that is concerned. Because there is certainly you can learn so much, but at the same time to kind of see how they actually performed and how they actually did, that's a different deal altogether. So defensively overall, Washington's 31st according to PFF with an 84.9 grade. Michigan's 10th for all of the kind of hand-wringing. Michigan's still kind of up there. Washington does fare a little bit better than Minnesota, who's 35th. And Michigan has played the number 2 team defensively in Texas so far. As far as run defense, the number you want to be really low, they're actually 27th with an 85.4 grade. They're actually better at run defense than they are in, let's see, because they separate this with pass rush and coverage. But they are better than they are with pass rush. Now, the pass rush, you should have some moments to be able to, Alex Orji should have some moments to be able to do some things. Washington is 49th with a 71.2 grade there, but coverage-wise, as their man coverage, remember, they are pretty good at 27 there as well. So I do want to kind of just point where Michigan is at some of these. 10th overall defensively, 11th run defense. Tackling has been the issue. We saw that against Texas, and we saw that kind of in the first couple weeks of the season. Then it's gotten better. 23 in the country. Pass rush, number 2 in the country. Coverage, 20 in the country. That's where Michigan stands overall. In terms of offensive prowess, where do they stand? Michigan, we don't even want to look where that is just for the sake of, let's hide. But Washington is 13th, so they do have a very good offense overall. 20th in passing. And when it comes to running the football, Washington is 36. Now, pass block is what I really want to kind of see, right? Because they had the Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line last year. They were able to get some passing off, but they weren't able to score. They're 44th in pass blocking against the number 2 pass rush in the country, according to PFF. So Michigan's got some capability and ability in this game to kind of, take advantage. Because, okay, Washington's pretty good, but pretty good is not the same as Washington is, elite at really much of anything at this point. So that is very good for Michigan in a lot of ways. Now let's look at the SP Plus rankings post week 5, and that was kind of what that is. And we'll see just kind of where they fare according to that. And then we will turn the page and say what I want to see Michigan do. We've done a couple where do they go from here, so we'll be more team specific here, game specific. Michigan is 15th in the post week 5 SP Plus on ESPN. Washington is 23rd. Michigan has the 63rd defense. I know a lot of you feel like it's the worst. It's 63rd. It's the lowest of the teams. Everyone that's ranked ahead of them has a much higher offense. Iowa, which is 2 below them, has a lower ranked offense at 86th. Just so it's not quite Iowa. It's almost Iowa. Washington has the number 28 offense and so they're 23rd, 28. Michigan's defense is 5th in the country, behind Iowa, Ohio State, Penn State, and Nebraska. So it's still doing pretty good. And Washington is 25th in terms of that. So Michigan's faced the number 2 team with the number 3 offense, number 8 defense. They've also faced USC team, which is ranked 1 ahead of Washington at number 22 with the number 8 offense, much better offensively, but worse defensively at 61st. So Washington's a little bit more balanced, but it also has the 130th special teams. Michigan's 4th in special teams. 4th. So that can be a place where they exploit. Win 2 out of the 3, and you're off to the races. So what does this game look like at Husky Stadium? Let's kind of preview it a little bit here in just a moment. But before we do, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. I'll tell you what, I hope that we get some new things to talk about next week, because I feel like a broken record with a lot of stuff the last 2 weeks. I feel like we aren't necessarily covering a lot of new ground because there isn't a lot of new ground to cover. So hopefully we'll have a lot more to talk about in a positive fashion, instead of being defensive, instead of trying to clarify things, just things that I'm seeing, which seem to be what the coaches are seeing, that a lot of the fans aren't seeing and some of the media aren't seeing. Hopefully we'll get to be able to kind of move on there. But what do I think this game will look like for Michigan going to Washington? It's the first road game. They're still talking like we relish the road game, make our crowd, make that crowd our crowd, that type of thing. Same kind of stuff we've heard. So I'll be interested to see. I think the good news for Michigan is defense tends to travel, and that's what they need. And here's the thing: Michigan's defensive lapses in large part have come due to communication issues. Shouldn't have that issue this week because, the home crowd will be quiet. It's going to be the opposite problem right now, is because now the offense is going to have to try to find a way to get better while it doesn't have a lot of ability to hear and all that stuff. I expect Husky Stadium to be quite loud. As long as they pack the defense comes and plays the way it should, then Michigan will be in a good spot in terms of being able to communicate better, get Will Rogers under duress. Let's go back to see just like where Washington stands at when it comes to sacks allowed, because that's a number I didn't look up before. They're 56. They've allowed 7 sacks. So you need a healthy Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore, TJ Guy, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant to really get there and find ways to get to the quarterback. I expect them to try to go to quick game like everyone does against Michigan. Michigan's got to be really good at diagnosing those underneath plays, those screen plays. One of the things that Brian John Marie said watching film, Washington's going to try to go horizontal on you. Familiar face, Giles Jackson will be one of those guys. And somehow he's still playing football. I don't know how. But they need to find ways to keep that offense at bay in terms of that. And the good news is Will Johnson also coming back most likely. And you got a Jair Hill that has looked a heck of a lot better in the last 2 weeks than he did the first 3. So I think that bodes really well for Michigan and its chances. What I would do offensively if I'm Michigan is just lean into what you started to do this last week. Get Alex Orji comfortable early, and with having Samaj coming back, and I do believe he is coming back, I would, maybe test the perimeter here and there. Maybe you try it with Donovan Edwards. See if you can get a perimeter swing pass to him, and just try to test the edges early. Have Nano and Kalel on the field at the same time. Force the defense to decide who it's going to be. You can play action that, right? Like fake handoff to Kalel and then throw to Donovan in some kind of swing pass type scenario. I think that could be a really good way to open the game. But you got to score on the first drive and hold them from scoring. Or if it's not the first drive, hold them from scoring for a couple drives, but get up 7-0. Just you need to build that confidence internally, because you don't want to find yourself in a 7-0 hole and being like, here we go again. Because they've already experienced that. The teams from last year and the year before were just clowning fools and didn't really have that kind of like, oh man, if this goes south, then it's not going to be good. They didn't have that. So they need to find a way to withstand some of that potential pressure and find ways to make things kind of work in their advantage. I think you're going to see the pass game look better. I'm going to predict that they're going to have more that he's going to basically double up. He's going to be maybe not fully double up, but going to be closer to 150 yards passing in this game. I don't think he'll necessarily get to 200, but I think that they're going to find a way to get up there. I think Washington's going to have some plans for the run. It's going to open up enough of the pass game. Michigan's going to force them to back off, and then they're going to be able to run the football. The good news for now, Rutgers is a team that likes to run the football a lot, and they have a lot of success with Kyle Monungai. He was pretty good, but it wasn't quite as effective last week as it was before, right? So I'm just doing a quick glance here to see if I can see where Rutgers is in terms of rushing offense. I don't think I can find it quickly, so we'll move out. They're 12th in rushing offense. So they are kind of what Michigan has wanted to be, but they started out against some teams that weren't very good, Howard and Akron, and then 153 against Virginia Tech, 184 against Washington. I think Michigan can be like 150 through the air and 200 on the ground, because I think that Washington hasn't seen a defense like this, at least not this staff. Some of the players certainly have, but not many. And then offensively, I just think that they're going to get bulldozed here and there. I think that the 1-2 punch of Kalel and Donovan is going to be too much for them. They're certainly not going to like seeing Donovan again. But I think that Michigan's going to find ways to run the football, and I think in part it's because they're going to be able to find ways to pass the football. Being able to see and understand what you're looking at for Alex Orji should be big. Now the question is the pass protection, are they going to be able to hold up as far as that's concerned? I think that's the big thing. They are 25th in sacks. They have 12 so far on the year. So they can get after the quarterback. By comparison, Michigan is 20th. So Michigan a little bit better with 13, one better. Excuse me. So Michigan needs to get off after the quarterback, and they need to be able to hold Washington at bay to some degree. It's going to be tough, but I think Michigan will do it. We'll get to more of the preview tomorrow with Trente Jones, and we will talk about that. And then on Friday, we'll be talking to you from Seattle. So anyway, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.